In trying to create a decent enough timeline for myself, I found the most effective way to do this was to map out the 11 Mexican governors of Alta California, or the term I prefer, jefes políticos, which gives us some of the best men who looked over this region, and also some of the worst.
Donald Trump.
I wish I knew how to say his phrase in Spanish.
You're fuegoed.
You're fuegoed. You're fuegoed. That's not Spanish at all. Please do not turn around and say...
Es fuegoed. Right. We got it. We got it.
We got it.
Right.
You can go home, Mr. Trump. Thank you.
You're all fuegoed.
It's funny saying a phrase that Donald Trump says in Spanish because we know how he feels about the language, the people.
He likes them?
Loves them. It made it easier for the timeline too, because a lot of the major events and shifts in power all have something to do, or all tied to the governors of the area. So if I followed the path of governors, you follow the path of events as well. So that was pretty much the way I did my research. So
I left a path of governors to get out of the enchanted forest once. Proceed.
They just wandered off though. They were no help. Yeah. So I'm going to name all the 11 men who ran Alta California for the 27 years that was ruled by Mexico.
Isn't that interesting? 11 pobladores, 11. We each have 11. Oh my God, it's like that Jim Carrey movie.
Wasn't there,
Liar.
Wasn't there 11 men in Lord of the Rings? The men who had the ring?
Oh my God, were there 11 in the Fellowship?
Not in the Fellowship.
The 11 men. I think there were 11 in the Fellowship also. What is happening? Are we Wiccan? I think I practice Kabbalah now. What's happening here?
Governors of Alta California. First one, Pablo Vicente Sola, who ran from 1815 to 1822. Sola was in the seat already when we became...
foot in both worlds.
Exactly. He was a transfer over. He was a segue. So the first actual governor of California that got put in there was Luis Aguelo, 1822 to 1825. After that, Jose Maria de Enchidilla from 1825 to 1831. Manuel Victoria, who ran from 1831 to 1832. Pio Pico held office for the first time for 20 days in 1832. After that, Jose Enchidilla returns but rules from the south from 32 to 33, while Agustin Zamorando rules from the north. Two governors at the same time. After him was Jose Figueroa from 33 to 35. Jose Castro followed him, 35 to 36.
Figueroa is a familiar name.
Yeah, a lot of these names.
So is Castro. What do you... Communist?
What's happening? After him, Nicolas Gutierrez ran for 4 months in 1836, and then Mariano Chico for another 3 months in 1836. After him, Juan Bautista Alvarado from 36 to 42. After him, Manuel Michoacana from 42 to 45, and then Pio Pico, 45 to 46.
Almost a bookend.
Look at that. And then for the last couple of days before they surrender, 1846, late 1846, early 47, General Jose Flores covered after that. As you walked us through, the Spanish and the Mexicans decided this ain't working, and Mexico takes Southern California, or as it was called then, Alta California. Of Mexico's rule over California, I've heard a lot of terms like political turmoil and constant state of revolt, but really I didn't get a sense of that in my readings. They were like difficult times, but the way I look at it, it was such a large space from San Diego to Monterey, and it was such fresh territory, so things are just like rocky. So I don't think of it as tumultuous or anything. It's just like, we're trying to figure it out. Like, it's bad, it's kind of good, we haven't figured it out. They're just trying to get a footing on everything. And then with like Manifest Destiny and the move west to cover the land between Atlantic to Pacific, it proved difficult, even more so, to like experiment with laws and territories, because like it seemed like everything was happening all at once. So like them trying to like establish themselves made it even harder with the Americans coming from the east. When they were first settling in, however, the Mexican government had a huge change in mind for California, and we touched on this before in Padre Issues, which was the secularization of the missions. I like how
it's such a casual phrase.
I know, but you know, Padre Issues?
You have Padre Issues, sure, right? Everyone knows it.
The Mexican government's intent was to free up the land from the missions and idealistically give the head of each Native American family a plot of land and cattle.
I remember that.
Yeah, so they could establish themselves.
Great plan.
They also...
it was a great plan. Great execution, I should say sarcastically.
That was sarcasm. Let's also mention that they wanted to give a lot of land to their friends, which, you know, for the ranchos, which they did. Yeah. The spearhead of this plan was the third governor of Mexico, Governor Echeandía, who had been plotting this since 1826, his second year in office, but wouldn't get the chance to put it into effect until 1834, after the Mexican Secularization Act of 1833 was decreed. This was huge for California because it meant that it wouldn't be a religious-run state any longer. We could finally worship Quawar again.
Long live Quawar! Is it Quomar? Who is it?
Quawar.
I remember you said Quomar at one point.
Yeah, I was tired. I apologize to the Tongva listeners.
Please release me.
Do not mock Quawar, please. Secularization pans out for the state because now settlers and simple folk can own the land they work, but it doesn't work out so well for the Tongva or any of the Native American tribespeople, like you were saying, because dividing up the land and giving each family their own lot to look after doesn't work for people who come from communal tribes. Giving up the land.
It was just a complete like clashing understanding of how the world works between the two people.
And they were enslaved that entire time, and like there is such a thing as institutionalization. So like now you're free, return to like no, we don't remember. So eventually
what happened to Yang Na?
So eventually what happens is after their farms don't bring in any profit, they have to sell to settlers and begin working as a dentured slave on their farms to pay off the debts basically, and then just returning to a life, like you were mentioning before, like just returning to the lives as slaves. But honestly, good intentions from the Mexican, I mean that is kind of good intentions from the Mexican government.
None of this was done with bad intentions, really.
But still.
It's misguided intentions.
Yes, it's misguided intentions, exactly.
It's just ignorant, misguided intentions.
I think we found the title of this episode, which is Ignorant, Misguided Intentions. Yeah, Encho Diaz seems like a good guy. The genuine article, you know?
But was that article feminine or masculine?
A little from column A, a little from column B.
Why do they have to be one or the other? We live in 2015 now.
So taking the seat directly after him was almost the complete opposite person. Manuel Victoria, who governed California from 1831 to 1832, asked me why it was just 1 year. Victoria was more of a military-minded man, more than a man of the people, and he was just very forceful character. As an aside, I love in all these readings when you were bad at your job at being a governor, they called you unpopular. I prefer the term infamous because you're popular, but not for a good reason. Anyways, what makes people look at Victoria as the opposite of Encho Diaz is that, other than being the opposite of his personality, he also sought to directly reverse secularization. He refused to push territorial legislature into action, and he refused to convene the departmental assembly. The citizens began to oppose him because he was not breaking the law by enacting this reform. He was just pretending like there wasn't one. So to retaliate against the citizens, he had around 100 people imprisoned and exiled the two leading opposers, Jose Carrillo and an American.
That's like a tenth of the population at this point.
Whittier is under arrest.
We're going to need a bigger handcuff.
So Jose Carrillo, one of the leading opposers, got exiled, and so did an American, Abel Stearns, got exiled to Baja California.
Boo-hoo.
Boo-hoo.
Boo-hoo, Baja.
So, of course, Californios, which if you were born in California or thought yourself as more of a Californian, you were called a Californio, won't stand for a tyrant. So in 1831, November of that year, a group of rebels banded together by Juan Bandini, Juan Carrillo, who's one of the guys who got exiled, and future governor Pio Pico, along with his brother Andres. These men and their Angelino rebels joined forces with troops from the Presidio in San Diego, and the two groups marched on Los Angeles to oust Manuel Victoria, who was marching south from Monterey, and he wants to squash this insurgency. He has about 30 men. The rebels have 150. This is the first Battle of Cahuenga. Pay attention, there's two.
They call it the Great Battle of Cahuenga. The Battle of Cahuenga to end all Battle of Cahuenga.
This ain't your mama's Cahuenga battle.
This ain't your Poblador's Cahuenga.
So the Cahuenga Pass is important when it comes to this area because you pretty much had to pass through it to get from the southern regions of the state to Universal Studios. It's so weird because I keep picturing it in my head, but I always picture the 101. Like there's like the horses are on the 101. I'm like, no, there wasn't anything there. It was just hills.
How did they get around the timing lane?
What was their exit? Yeah, if you're curious where the Cahuenga Pass was, it is now around the area of Universal Studios. But before the path was set in, the LA River ran through the pass and into Hollywood, which was later rerouted through Griffith Park. It was not only the access point to the valley, it was also a really hilly terrain, so it was good for like strategic moves, strong military grounds, because there was a high ground and a low ground. It was good for like troops and stuff. And
low ground's the better ground, right?
Yeah, you definitely want to be low so you can see what they're doing when they're above you.
So you can really see the bullet coming at you. It makes a great silhouette against the sunlight.
I love being blinded before I get shot. There are some different accounts on things, so I'll try to present any confusion I had on what, because I keep reading like this guy did this, and I'm reading another thing like no, that guy did this, like but who? And I can't I don't know how to clear it up.
These early days, they really don't seem to be that well documented.
No, this seems like it should be because I got a lot of information from like military websites of like this is how this
I called the
down.
Pentagon.
So Victoria and his men met the rebels at the mouth of Cahuenga Pass. He saw the commander of the rebel group from San Diego was a man he knew, Pablo de la Portilla, and he ordered him and his men to join the ranks. Portilla refused and rode out on a horseback to battle, which angered Victoria, and he ordered his troops to fire. But here's the thing about that. Because the communities were not that large, soldiers on both sides of the battle were familiar with each other and had no real intention to hurt anybody. So
John?
Hit Kurt. See, Kurt? Hit Kurt. So when the orders came from Victoria to fire, the soldiers fired above the heads of the opposing rebels. Whether this was an agreement, it was like a pre-planned thing, or all the soldiers were just hoping no one noticed if I didn't shoot anybody.
They all had the same idea because they're all from the same family.
Then the rebels retaliated in the same way, just wasting shots. The fact that after the guns were fired and everyone was still alive was obvious proof that like nothing was going to happen.
Good war, guys. Good wars.
Can we go home?
See you at the barbecue.
All ghosts, huh?
You look good for a casualty.
So then I read this happen. I'm not sure if it's true, but I'm going to say it anyways. Maybe if someone wants to dispute me, that's fine.
Mr. Magoo stood in front of all the bullets.
Bruno! One of the victorious soldiers, Captain Jose Pacheco, got the command wrong, and instead of firing his rounds, he charged the rebels on horseback. He wasn't shot because he was actually in what the normal line of fire would be, and since no one was shooting there, he would just simply pass through. He came to a halt.
Oh, God.
Which, if you've seen Dances with Wolves, that's exactly what happened. He came to a halt about halfway when he realized that nobody else was out there, and then the leader of the rebels, Captain Jose Avila, took offense at this mistakenly bold move. Avila was, by the way, one of the people imprisoned by Victoria and came out. Avila and Pacheco met on the battleground, and they met for single combat with lances.
With lances.
With lances. And both were excellent horsemen, so it was a good fight. Pacheco at some point got the advantage over Avila and knocked a lance out of his hands, to which Avila responded by drawing a gun and shooting Pacheco in the back and killing him. Victoria was infuriated by this, as was I, so he shot and killed Avila.
Now the battle starts.
Yeah, I also read that Avila was the one who attacked Manuel Victoria with a lance and scarred him, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me since there's only 2 casualties of the Battle of Cahuenga Pass, and they were both Pacheco and Avila. The other account, which I'm guessing is true, is that Portilla was the one who charged Victoria and put a lance through his face, tearing a big chunk of his precious flesh off. After that, it was pretty much done. After he was wounded, his troops weren't really into fighting, so it was like, enough's enough. Victoria was taken to San Gabriel mission to have his wounds treated, and after that, he formally surrendered to his predecessor, Jose Enchadilla, who was governor before he came in. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. The governor's seat was shared by Enchadilla and Pio Pico through 1832, and in January of 33, the duties of governor were given to Jose Figueroa, who fought for Mexico's independence years earlier. He served California while organizing territorial and local government after Victoria had dropped the ball so badly. But Figueroa left office in 1835 from failing health and appointed Jose Castro to the governor's seat. Castro had been another citizen who would have built up a resistance against Victoria. Around this time in 1835, Texas separated from Mexico. Remember the Alamo, but it hadn't happened yet, so there's nothing to remember. Mexico was set on not losing California to the United States, but it was getting harder. Mexico never necessarily had a heavy hand in this area, and after the land from the missions opened up, not only did Californios were moving in, but so were Americans coming from the north and the east. And they're also joining in on fights too, so you're kind of seeing like it's mingling, and
Americans love a good fight.
They can't stop fighting. So after Castro was Nicolas Gutierrez, who had served along with Castro in the Mexican Revolution. He wasn't particularly good at his job, and they called him El Tuerto because he had a squint in his eye. It means one eye. God. That didn't make him bad at his job. Well, maybe it did, but it was a handicap, so, be nice. But he was seen as tactless and completely unconcerned with the people of California and didn't know what they wanted, didn't know how to give it to them. Although he was in charge of secularization of the mission of San Gabriel, which was good in many ways, he also had the opportunity to make Los Angeles the capital of the state instead of Monterey, and he was sort of pushing for that because the area was becoming more prominent in the state. But the people were against it since there was only 2 or 3 administrative buildings, and the owners of the buildings refused to offer them to the governor, so that plan was a bust. So at this point, with the seemingly incompetent governor and the removal of the mission system and nothing foundational to replace it yet, California was in like a strange limbo state, no pun intended.
I've always thought of us as the limbo state.
It looks good on the flag. After Gutierrez had tried to move the capital south, Mexico began to implement more rules on the citizens, which many found to just be unjust. And of course, a citizen revolt began against Mexico. The revolt was led by a Monterey native named Juan Bautista Alvarado, which many recall was a brilliant politician and was a very courteous man. He, along with a band of concerned citizens, felt that the Mexican government was neglecting California, which they were. And just like a long-distance relationship, maybe we should spend some time apart. Alvarado and his group managed to force Gutierrez's surrender and declare California as an independent state with hopes of gaining a federal system of government. Wasn't quite official yet, though, because although through many weak attempts, Mexico still wanted some control of California, even though at this point they were pretty much seen as a losing battle. If small factions of wealthy landowners can join up and keep fighting a Mexican government, I don't think we're going to win this. The problem with all of this was that no government officials recognized Alvarado as the governor, and Alvarado was not interested in giving up his governor's chair to anyone who was interested in progressing California. He was really a man of California. The government officials, which included Juan Bandini and Pio Pico, who were involved in the Battle of Cahuenga Pass, sent a group of officers north to Los Angeles to remove Alvarado from office. One of the officers was Captain Portilla, who you might remember was a man who scarred Manuel Victoria.
The man with the scar?
But the man with the scar, no, the man who gives the scars. But their attempts at removing him failed. This one, I believe, was stopped because Alvarado sent troops to again stop the southern Mexican troops from getting the jump on him. Mexican officials weren't happy with Alvarado, and he had a few guys in line to become governor, but political strife and different battles were getting in their way. There was just a huge dispute over the legality of Alvarado's move as governor, so he just continued on that way, and as far as I can tell, was a decent governor. His secularization was in effect, and he began to parcel out land grants to people, and the ranchos started springing up even more. More ranchos for everyone. In August of 38, a ship arrived at Monterey with a letter to Alvarado from Captain Andres Castillo in Mexico City that he had been successful in getting Alvarado's appointment and became official. He was a governor in 1840. But his downfall was already starting to come into effect. There was a lot of land disputes because he was dishing out land and he wasn't really the governor, so they were able to take some of it back. Governor Alvarado and his commanding general Vallejo, which was his uncle, began to fight over whether two people could hold the governor's position or not. Now, there's some confusion on my part. I can't tell if Vallejo...
Why is that even a question?
It's a governor's bench. I can't tell if Vallejo wanted both of them to be governor or if he thought only one man could do the job and he wanted to do it. This happens when you appoint yourself as governor and get your uncle to be a high-ranking official. The result of all this needless arguing was that they were both fired and Mexico appointed a new governor, the last to be sent from Mexico. So after Alvarado comes Manuel Micheltorena, who rivals Manuel Victoria's reign as the person opposed to the people. He was not a very good governor, and he also had to be pulled from duty. Micheltorena was another tactless, military-minded creep who lacked sound judgment. Good for him. The war between the U.S. and Mexico seemed unavoidable because the United States planned to annex Texas as a state. Remember the Alamo, but not yet. So to help finance
Prepare to remember.
You better remember. It hasn't happened, but you better remember. So to help finance the war, the Mexican government sent Micheltorena to California to collect taxes, which he brought with him an army of thugs. These 300 or so convicts were felons released from the jails of the states of northern Mexico. This army
Are we not Australia? All of our soldiers were ex-cons, and now they're bringing in thugs to keep us in order.
Yep. I'm not arguing with you. We are the Australia of America. This army raided the ranchos of California, plundering, burning, torturing as they saw fit. It was a very legal crime wave that ran over Los Angeles. They were thieves and bullies, and every town that they went to had people turning against Micheltorena, who completely supported their actions. They ran around stripping people of clothes, assaulting whale captains at ports. They were just
not the whale captains.
Not the whale captains.
But he was so close to getting the white whale.
Micheltorena was just not a good governor. He would be calling like a meeting of assembly and not giving enough notice to like Pio Pico and the southern members to be present. So he'd call a meeting and be like, I'll see you guys in a day. I know it takes 5 days to get up here.
We're having a meeting on top of Mount Low in 20 minutes. See you there.
At some point, he signed an agreement to send his convicts back to Mexico within 3 months, but then violated it when he met stupid John Sutter, a Swiss settler from the north who was up to no good. Micheltorena promised land to Sutter and his men. He actually had a lot of Americans on his side, probably because Sutter helps establish Sacramento. I didn't do a lot of research on him because he's up north.
Sutter's Mill?
Yeah, Sutter's Fort.
Oh, no. No, that's Sutter.
So obviously, and totally necessarily, former governors Jose Castro and Juan Alvarado began a revolt to oppose him in Los Angeles.
This sounds like a very tumultuous time. You were saying it wasn't too tumultuous.
Well, there's not a lot of...
tumultuous. I've heard the word revolt a lot more times than you do in a peace-loving era.
But here's the thing about it is that I don't think a lot of blood was shed. Like, I'm sure some people died, but it wasn't like the massacre of something. A lot of like, hey, you better cut it out. Like, all right, fine. As far as I can tell.
But I'm scarring your face forever.
Yeah, these armies were made up of, like I said, wealthy landowners, because they know how to fight. But this army, the revolting army, also had a lot of Americans in it.
It was a revolting army.
One of which, William Workman of La Puente, who was the uncle of William Workman, who we know as established Boyle Heights. Also at some point was being robbed by Tabasco Vasquez. He also worked with Pacific Electric to extend the line to Alhambra Temple City in the early days. Same name, totally confused me. Not even a junior because it's his uncle. William Workman? This is William Workman.
William Workman of the older days. Nice to meet you.
I was so sure it was him, and then like, that kind of doesn't make sense. He would be like 100 years old. And then I looked up the dates, and he was born in like 1835. Like, he would have been 6.
He was a prodigy. No one suspected the 6-year-old. And then here he comes with his lance.
Give him the little baby gun. So in February of 1845, Micheltorena and his thug army and the Americans met with a rebel army led by Pio Pico Castro.
This sounds a lot more exciting than it is.
Oh, no, definitely.
The rebel army, the thug, Darth Vader with his bounty hunter is coming.
What's that, Darth Vader? You don't want to do this anymore? We agree.
Let's get ready for the next one.
They all met north of the Cahuenga Pass at Rancho La Providencia, which is now Burbank. The current address is
I could see it.
3204 Nichols Canyon in Burbank. Apparently, Burbank construction crews found cannonballs from the fight buried decades later. So Micheltorena was heavily armed, many say thanks to Sutter, and the rebel army was fine, I guess. And they all opened fire, and again, 2 deaths. 1 horse and 1 mule.
Hey, come on. There's no way to talk about them.
But after the cannon dust settled, the rebel side decided they just wanted to come to an understanding. Too many mules have died. 2 Americans, one of which may have been Workman, rose a white flag and approached the Micheltorena side, led by Captain Brandt.
An American would never raise a white flag against a Mexican. Mexican.
That's just in the white-face Constitution. The two parties met and discussed the future of California that was going to be operated by Mitchell Trelina's thugs, and they decided, hey, that's probably not the best thing ever. Pio Pico joined in and discussed with them their land grants issued by Mitchell Trelina, which was compensation for joining his army. He cleared up the misunderstanding that since they were not citizens of Mexico, their land grants meant nothing, but he promised them if they abandoned Mitchell Trelina, he would give his word of honor as a gentleman to carry out a promise of protection on the land they had now, and if they would become citizens of Mexico, he would issue them proper titles. And they dispersed, agreeing with Pico's promise, which if they knew the big scheme of things, they would have been pissed that in like 2 years it was going to be America anyways. They would have had their land still. Mitchell Trelina found out that the Americans had abandoned him.
Hear Yankee Doodle in the distance. What's that?
What's that?
No, don't worry. No, come on, give me your stuff.
It's a Mexican thing. Mitchell Trelina found out the Americans had abandoned him about an hour later, and that night there was a white flag hanging from his camp. Pio Pico and his team negotiated with Mitchell Trelina.
There will be no white flag hanging from my door.
Pio Pico and his team negotiated with Mitchell Trelina, and he formally surrendered and agreed that him and his thugs would sail off back to Mexico. Pio Pico would be taking his place as governor of Los Angeles. I've read a lot of different things about Pio Pico. For the most part, it seems to be he's like always on the right side of the fight, usually fighting off anyone who's drunk with power. But I also read that he like sold mission lands and structures to private citizens for like major profit. That's how he got rich, which is why I imagine many of these guys were interested in secularization. Oh, we freed up this land because we don't want this to be religious. Great. I want that and I want that. He sold San Fernando Mission to a private citizen, Eugenio de Salas, in 1846. He did this as American troops swept across California and didn't resist them. Pio Pico did not resist them at all. It's like, yep, come get it. After this point is when the real battle for Los Angeles begins.
Oh.
And this...
How many cows are going to die this time? How many times must the cannonballs fly into a horse's face before we learn that we're all just living on the land of the Keech?
And this battle for Los Angeles did not involve aliens. Well, neither did the other one really, but this one especially.
But all the rest. Did we mention that Pio Pico was from Venus, which is a region of Mexico?
Named after the planet
Mars. It's very confusing.
American forces had their big dumb eyes on California. There was a faction of Americans in the north who had grown weary of neglectful Mexican government and their subpar governors, and they wanted to secede and create a California republic, which later became known as the Bear Flag Revolt.
Isn't that fight still going on?
Yeah. The Bear Flag Revolt was led by American Army officer and explorer John C. Fremont of what is now Sacramento. Now, they got themselves into some minor battles. Fremont and the Bear Flaggers officially took command of the unguarded Presidio of San Francisco on July 1st, and 6 days later, they took the capital of Monterey, which was 3 weeks after Pico sold the mission to De Solis. Perfect timing, pal. Fremont hooked up with the American Commodore Robert Stockton, like you mentioned, and achieved the rank of lieutenant colonel. And the two men assembled a group of settlers and sharpshooters from Monterey to head south to seize Los Angeles.
Oh, God.
But the traffic.
It took them 10 years.
The damn 5 freeway.
They stopped at Cattleman's Ranch because that's where all of the lost herd that Rivera had bringing from Mexico got sent to.
The cows own the land now.
They are delicious and just.
So they get to Los Angeles in August of 1846, and the city is abandoned. Pico and Castro had split to Sonora to gather troops and beg the Mexican government for reinforcements.
Is Sonora like our farm team?
I think it's like our farm team. It's like where we go to become Californians. So Stockton rolls up. City is empty. Easy peasy. I'll leave some of my guys here just in case.
How empty are we talking?
I don't think completely empty. I just don't think there's any military.
Yeah.
So there's just people wandering like, all right. So he left a small group there to be led by Captain Archibald Gillespie.
The jazz player?
Archie G. However, all across the state, the Californios, who were loyal to Mother Mexico, were assembling in secret and building a resistance, which was to be led by Jose Flores, which Stockton and Gillespie had no idea what was happening. Within a month, they chased away the Americans occupying the city government house, who fled to Fort Moore Hill. Listen to lizard people. Fighting continued until September of that year, when Gillespie signed an agreement that allowed him and his Marines to escape to San Pedro without getting attacked.
I like how they're like, we must retreat. Where are we going? A block away. You can see each other from...
I see you! Nah, we're keen.
We're lizard people.
We're cool with lizard people, right? Okay, we signed a treaty.
Not anymore?
Get them before they build tunnels. I can't wait to re-listen to this episode and find out what you said, because I couldn't hear you.
You said that about my mom?
That mother. But that was just a small victory, and was the Mexican-American War. In December of that year, American troops began marching from San Diego to take New Mexico, and Stockton and Fremont gathered around 1,000 men and headed towards Los Angeles.
Oh, no.
In January of 1847, the Battle of Los Angeles takes place on 2 back-to-back days, January 8th and January 9th. The first, on January 8th, was the Battle of Rio San Gabriel, which is now Whittier, Pico Rivera, and Montebello. They were hit hard by the Americans. Troops heading towards New Mexico met with Stockton's army, and they combined as one big army. The next day, the Battle of Mesa, which happened in Vernon, was the last armed resistance to American domination. They were just outnumbered.
The new pride of Vernon. Way to hold us down, Vernon.
Good job, Vernon. It's weird in some places. I've read that it was a really bloody battle. In others, I read it was completely bloodless. I read that the big decision in not completely obliterating Mexico, other than it just being morally wrong to kill that many people, was that Americans had heard about the Battle of La Providencia and how it was settled by negotiation. So they said, well, if they're reasonable people, let's just kill them. I don't know if that's true or not, but on January 13th of 1847, Pio Pico's brother, Andres Pico, commander of the California Army, met with Fremont at Campo de Cahuenga, which is now in Studio City. It's still there, 3919 Lancaster Boulevard.
Right at the metro station.
Yeah, it's right at the metro station.
Park there and walk into City Walk. It's free. Don't listen to this metro.
Don't pay $8 to City Walk. Never give them money.
You save that money for Popcornopolis.
They met there and discussed what surrendering entailed for...
What is this word? Does it mean we win?
It means I still walk away with a lot of pride, right? Sure.
Wear this. It's a donkey costume. We're all going to pin the tail on you. You surrender.
You be the top half and
your brother's the bottom. Right?
Your brother, who looks like Herman Munster.
Or the king of the Gungans.
Pico fought for and received protection for the rights of the California residents, and Fremont agreed. They signed the capitulation of Cahuenga on the kitchen table, ending the Mexican-American War in Los Angeles.
I've seen that kitchen table.
Have you?
It's in the Natural History Museum.
Get out, really?
I'm going to put a picture of it online. It was very exciting.
I'm excited to see that. It might be my favorite kitchen table. The Mexican-American War altogether ends in 1848. Pico was very pleased that their terms and agreement was so amicable that he puts together a fiesta for Fremont and his men. So after years of neglectful rule by the Mexican government, Los Angeles is now part of the United States. Have at it, boys.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, it's weird that all of the revolution that was going on the East Coast was like the bloodiest war ever fought, and everyone here is like, oh my God, you shot a sheep. Let's never do this again.
We named him.
His name was Sheeperly.
Listen, people died, okay? And it was very sad. And war is hell. I'm so glad
Negotiation is hell. Peaceful settlement is hell. Especially when it's in Burbank. I feel like we just went through the plot of all 3 Lord of the Rings movies, but in a very dry way.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, definitely. As it was always critiqued a lot of walking around.
Yeah.
It took days to get everywhere.
Well, there were so many ranchos in Middle-earth.
Rancho the Elves.
Rancho El Mordor. Yeah, so those are the first however many years of Los Angeles.
It could have ended up very differently.
Yeah, it's weird to think, like, what if it was still Spanish, or what if it was still Mexican?
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
Yeah. I bet you do.
This country. Every Mexican assembly I go to, we talk about what could have been.
You're not supposed to know about those. Delete this part.
They're gonna kill me. They're gonna kill my
Somehow
family.
I'm invited to the Mexican ones. They got very confused by my last name.
I do read about a lot of Mexican people who have red hair. You would fit right in.
I don't want people stalking me.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Going
right,
after
right,
every
right.
red-haired person.
Which is why, if you're wondering why our Instagram has no pictures of us, it's because of that.
Look, I'm hideous.
I might be Quasimodo.
I'm sorry. You know the Elephant Man? Combine him with the Phantom of the Opera, and you've got my better-looking brother.